Good morning, and welcome to the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. Today, it's time to announce the prize in economic sciences. This prize is funded by the Central Bank of Sweden, the Sveriges Riksbank, and awarded by the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel. And this award is the 48th since its conception in 1969. I am Göran Hansson, I'm the Secretary General of the Academy, and with me today is, on my left, Professor Strömberg, who is the chairman of the Economics Prize Committee, and on my right side, Professor Tomas Sjöström, who is a member of the committee and an expert in the field of this year's prize. This year's prize is about contracts. Årets ekonomipris handlar om kontrakt. Kungliga Vetenskapsakademin har beslutat att utdela Sveriges Riksbanks pris i ekonomisk vetenskap till Alfred Nobels minne för år 2016 till Oliver Hart och Bengt Holmström för deras bidrag till kontraktsteorin. The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has decided to award the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel for 2016 to Oliver Hart and Bengt Holmström for their contributions to contract theory. You can see the new laureates on the screen above me. Oliver Hart was born 1948 in London, but he has worked in the United States since the 1980s, and he's currently the Andrew Feurer Professor of Economics at Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in the US. Bengt Holmström was born in 1949 in Helsinki in Finland, but he has had his career in the United States. He is the Paul Samuelson Professor of Economics at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, also in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He is a foreign member of our academy, but he has not participated in any aspect of the prize work or the Academy's work in general in recent years. That was the announcement, and we will now hear more about our new laureates and their work from Professor Strömberg of the Economics Prize Committee.
Thank you,
please.
Göran. So this prize is about contracts, and contract is really a very fundamental phenomenon that I think affects all of us in society. Probably most of us have some kind of insurance for property, for our car or for our house. That means we've entered an insurance contract with an insurance company. All of us, or many of us at least, has borrowed to buy this house or car, which means we have a loan contract with a bank that we're a party to. When we bought our house or car, we wrote a purchasing contract with the seller of this property. And if we have a job, we probably have an employment contract with our employer. Okay, so all of us are affected by contracts. And actually contracts is broader than this, because many phenomena, many institutions we see in society are actually a contract or can be analyzed with contract theory. So for example, when we own something, when we have property rights to something, that's a type of contract that says what we can do with our property. If we, the political constitution in the country is a type of contract between the state and the citizens of that country. So this is very fundamental, and the theories that Hart and Holmström have developed are incredibly important for us to understand these types of contracts and institutions. So one aspect of contracts that a lot of us think about when we think about contracts is that they're about sharing financial returns from some cooperation. Okay, so it basically says if we have a contract, who should pay whom, when, and how much. Okay. Now, from a theoretical standpoint, you can think about these as what we call a principal and agent problem. Okay, so a principal would be, for example, if we think about an employment contract, the principal would be the employer who hires someone to do some job. So the person who's hired is the agent. The agent is supposed to do some job on behalf of the principal. And what you have to do is design a contract, a compensation for this agent that is sort of designed in the best way. And it turns out these contracts typically have to balance two different forces. Okay, so the first one is that since the principal, since the employer doesn't necessarily see what the agent or the employee is doing all the time, you have to have a contract that gives incentives for this agent to act in the interest of this principal. Okay, to give the incentive part. But the other part, which is in conflict with this sometimes, is that you don't want to put too much risk on the agent. Okay, the employee is not going to be very happy if the pay, goes up and down and fluctuates all the time. So you also want to provide some risk sharing, some insurance to this agent. So if we take an insurance contract, for example, okay, we would love if the insurance company fully covered our losses if we have an accident or if our house burns down. We would like to get everything covered so we have no risk. But the problem is that that's going to give us the wrong incentives potentially, because if we know we're fully covered, we're not going to take as well care of our property as we otherwise would have. That's why we have deductibles and co-payments, right? We have to pay a little bit ourselves if we have a loss. The insurance company doesn't cover everything. And that's to give us the right incentives to be careful. Okay? So risk versus incentives. So this is where Bengt Holmström's contributions are in understanding this principal-agent problem and how to design contracts. So this is an old problem. I mean, already Adam Smith talked about the principal-agent problem, but this research really took off thanks to Bengt Holmström's contributions starting in the late 1970s and onwards. And he basically has a number of different research contributions that highlights all sorts of different important aspects of how to do these contracts. What information do you want to base performance on? What do you do when an agent has to be incentivized to do lots of different things, not just one thing? How do you incentivize a team? So maybe people are working together to produce something. How do you think about giving the right incentives over time? For example, how does your future career prospects affect your incentives to work today? Okay. So to be a little bit more concrete, let's think about an example that I think a lot of people are familiar with. How do we pay managers and CEOs of big companies? Okay. So this is a principal-agent problem. The principal are, the shareholders. Okay, they want to hire this agent, this CEO, to act in their interest, to create as much value for the shareholders as possible, for example. So it turns out you can apply Holmström's different theories on lots of aspects of this problem. So for example, the informativeness principle, which is a famous result of Holmström, that talks about what information should you base, say, the bonus on. Okay? One implication of that, for example, is that it might seem natural to reward a CEO if the profits of their company is high, okay? But that means that's not the full story, because if we just base bonus on the profits of their own company, then we're going to be paying the CEO in many times just because they're being lucky, or punish them because they're unlucky. So if you run an oil company, you might be more profitable just because the oil price goes up. That's just luck. We don't want to reward the CEO for that. Okay? So that's an implication of the informativeness principle. Another natural example is that a CEO needs to do many different things to create value in a company. So for example, we might want them to really make sure that this year's profits are high, but we might also want to make sure that they take the best long-run decisions in the company. We invest in, let's say, R&D or long-term investments where the profits may show up, far into the future. Okay, so how do you balance these incentives for, this year's profits versus long-term value for the company? And one interesting finding here is that, typically it's easier to measure profits today compared to long-run value. Okay. So there's a temptation to base the bonus on the thing you can observe or easiest measure, right? The profits today. But that has a problem, because if you only base the the bonus on today's profits, then maybe everything that the CEO will focus on is just this year's profits and forget about long-run investments that are important for the firm. So in that situation, maybe you can't have any bonus at all, not even on short-term profits, if you want to have the right balance with incentives. And the third example is this career concerns model of Holmström, which basically says that when you're young, you get an incentive. Even if you don't have a bonus, you have an incentive to do the right thing because you might get promoted and get a pay raise in the future. But this also tells you that if you think about a CEO, maybe having a big bonus or performance pay is much more important when they're getting old and closer to retirement compared to when they're young and are incentivized by future career prospects. So that sort of summarizes Bengt Holmström's contribution. Now, Oliver Hart introduced another aspect of contracting that turned out to be very important and useful, which has to do with incomplete contracts. Okay, so if we look at a contract, it doesn't just specify, payments between people, but it also says who should have the right to decide on things in this cooperation. Okay. Now, why are these decision rights in these contracts? Well, it has to do with the fact that you can't specify everything in a contract. It will become impossible. They'll become larger than that one. Okay, there's so many things that can happen in the future that we can't even imagine and write down what will happen in the contract. So when we can't do that, then we have to say, okay, what happens if something unexpected or unspecified happens? Who has the right to decide what to do then? Okay, that's where these decision rights come in. So what contracts also do is that they decide who should, or they allocate these decision rights between the contracting parties. Who has the right to make the decision when we haven't specified it beforehand? And this is really what incomplete contracting theory is about. So again, there were sort of informal arguments of how to understand decision rights, ownership, property rights in this context, but there wasn't any formal theory before Oliver Hart and his co-authors developed this starting in the mid-1980s. The idea here, again, is that when contracts are incomplete, you haven't specified anything, then you have to write down who has the right to make the decision, okay, of what to do. Now, having the right to make the decision, that gives you power, okay? And that power helps you actually capture a bigger piece of the cake in your relationship, okay? So if you have the right to decide, if you own the asset, then you're going to get a bigger reward from the cooperation. And that in turn affects your incentives to, for example, invest in this relationship. So this is sort of the gist of the theory. They first applied it to the question of whether a firm should own its supplier or not. Okay, so that's called vertical integration. But it just turned out this is an incredibly rich theory to explain many, many different things. So to give you some examples, this theory was applied to understand, what is really the difference between the firm and the market, okay? What kind of transactions, economic transactions, should better take place within firms and which ones should occur in markets? It has been applied to understand this financial contracting problem, okay? If we want to borrow or get money from an investor, how do we specify the decision rights in that relationship? It can be applied to organization design. So who should have the right to decide? Should the boss decide on everything, or should you delegate more to the employees? That's a problem you can analyze with this theory. And the last one, which I'm going to spend a little bit more time on, is the issue of privatization. Okay? So let's say a government wants some public service to be provided. We can think about a prison, or a healthcare hospital, or a school, or garbage collection. Okay? Should the government own this service provider, or should you write the contract with a private service provider? Okay? Now, without incomplete contracting theory, you really can't think about ownership. So let's say that a government wants to get both high quality of this service, but they also want cost efficiency. You don't want to spend too much taxpayers' money on getting this service. So you have these two goals. Now let's say you could measure some quality and you could measure costs. Well, then you would just write a pay performance contract that gives, pays the provider more if quality is high and costs are low and less otherwise. Now, in this world, it doesn't matter who owns it. You could have a government employee that has the same pay performance contract as, let's say, a private provider. Okay? So to get ownership to matter, you really have to be in a world where contracts are incomplete. You can't exactly specify in a contract what good quality is, okay, for example. So this gives a role for ownership, and it's going to be very different than if the government owns the service provider or if it's a private service provider that you pay to do the service. So in general, it's very hard if you have a government-owned service to provide good incentives for either for cost-cutting or quality, because it's very hard to credibly reward government employees for cutting costs or improving quality. Now, that doesn't mean that private ownership is always better. So Hart's model really tells you which type of factors go in the direction of public or private ownership. So, for example, in a situation where cost reductions can really hurt quality, okay? Well, that would push you more towards public ownership. If innovations, future innovations to improve quality of services are really important and very hard to specify, well, that factor tends to move in the direction of private ownership in this model. And how competitive a private market will be also turns out to be very important. If competition is not expected to work very well, well, then that goes in the direction of public ownership. So this isn't a model that says that one thing is always better than the other, but it tells you that maybe, you know, garbage collection has a different optimal setup than, let's say, a prison. Okay. So to conclude, this theory has really been incredibly important, not just for economics, but also for other social sciences. So everything ranging from corporate governance and firms to, you know, constitutional law and politics can be analyzed with these kind of tools. And thanks to their research, we now can analyze not just, you know, financial terms, you know, who should get paid what, but also these control and decision rights, ownership, property rights, and other types of decision rights in contracts. And this theory is both positive, as we call it, which means you can explain the type of contracts we see in society, but it's also normative. It can actually help us write better contracts, both in public policy and in private markets. So that's it.
Thank you, Per. Now, at this stage, we may have one of our laureates with us on the phone line, Professor Bengt Holmström. Good morning, Professor Holmström. Are you there?
Good morning. I'm here.
Very good. This is Göran Hansson of the Academy again. And since we spoke an hour ago, I have moved to our press conference and announced the prize to you and Dr. Hart. Are you ready to take some questions from the journalists?
Yes.
Would it be okay in Swedish as well as in English?
That's okay.
Very good. Who would like to start? Please.
I'll take it in English. Congratulations. How did you react when you got the call from Stockholm about an hour ago?
Well, I was dazed, like most prize winners. Very surprised and very happy.
More questions? Yeah, please go ahead.
Could I take another one? You have studied, you have done research on contracts. Could I ask you about bonuses for CEOs? What do you think? Should you give big bonuses to CEOs?
Well, in economics, we don't really take a stand on the size of the bonuses. So they seem extraordinarily high. But my theories don't take a stand on that as much as it studies the question about what kind of structure should be used. And in this regard, I think my personal view is that they are too complicated today, and that on the other hand, what has been improved in late years is what's called the vesting, meaning that they don't get everything in a very short period. They get things over time, and so but it's a very complicated problem.
And one last question: how do you feel right now?
I feel very lucky and grateful to the committee and my colleagues and the co-authors and family and everybody.
More questions? Gentleman over there.
Hej, Jens Nordström från TV4 Nyheter. Jag tänkte pröva på svenska, Bengt Holmström. Går det bra?
Det går bra.
Till att börja med ska vi säga grattis. Du har ju suttit i Nokias styrelse. Är det viktigt för forskare att få erfarenheter från det privata näringslivet på det sätt som du har fått?
För mig har det varit hela mitt liv viktigt att vara nära näringslivet. Och jag började ju inte som en akademiker utan jag började arbeta på Alfred i Finland och det var där jag blev intresserad av de här incitamentproblemen. Så att jag har inte hela mitt liv haft en liten del av mig själv i näringslivet, i styrelser och sen har min hustru ett familjeföretag också där jag har varit i styrelsen. Så att jag tar mycket inspiration från det här verkliga livet så att säga.
När du har forskat på kontraktsteori, vad kunde du ta med dig därifrån in i näringslivet?
Det nämndes just de här bonusarna för det där bonusarna för de här verkställande direktören och andra människor så det är ju det där det är ju en konkret fråga men man kan säga att nästan hela den här företagsstrukturen och organisationen och annat incitament är inte alls bara de här pengarna man betalar utan det är hurdana organisationsformer man använder om man som ni hörde om Oliver Haas teorier om vem har beslutsrätt här och så vidare. Så det här är ett stort system, det här incitamentsproblematiken, som påverkar alla strukturer.
Slutligen, det är ju inte bara ära att få ekonomipriset, det är ju en stor säck pengar som följer med det också. Vad tänker du göra med pengarna?
Det har jag inte funderat på faktiskt. Det är den sista saken jag tänker på.
Tack så mycket.
Tack.
Lady over there, Ginian Axelsson.
Hi, congratulations. I'm Sufficient Axelsson from Green Post and CRI freelance. I'd just like to ask you, did you ever expect this or ever think of you will win the Nobel Prize? Thank you.
Well, this profession and being in crane biz, obviously people talk about it, and I would say other people have talked about it, but no, the short answer is I certainly did not expect it, at least at this time. So I was very surprised, and I'm very happy, of course. But I think most people, when one hears the reactions, is sort of a sense of things being surreal.
Thank you. Next, please.
Johan Schick from Dagens Nyheter. Congratulations. I have a question concerning contract theory, and that is when you look at the incentives for the agent, do you think there's a difference between if the principal is only shareholders, owners, or if they are stakeholders, including different parts in society?
Yes, it would make a difference in the sense that people who get to decide incentives look at them from their own angle. But one of the important lessons from contract theory is that whatever contract you write, you always have to think about the other parties involved as well. So you have to look at it more broadly than just look at it, from the point of view of the shareholder. The shareholder, when he is or she is maximizing the own benefit, also has to think about all the other parties that are involved. So it's not what we in economics call, we are trying to maximize the total pie, meaning get it to be a win-win situation for everybody.
Thank you. The gentleman with the big camera over there.
David Keaton, Associated Press. So the panel explained your work and the word incentives came back frequently. may I ask you what was the incentive to begin research in this area, and what incentive will this Nobel Prize bring you, sir?
Well, on the first question, the incentive to study this came from actually first working before I became an academic. It was incidental that I became an academic. I went to Stanford for a one-year cultural exchange stipend, and I had realized that in the 70s, you know, the company I was working for, they tried to use computers to decide how the company should make its decisions and make its strategic plans, and that's when I realized that the issue wasn't really about, you know, the difficulty of coming up with the best plan. The bigger issue was also to create incentives for people to give the right information that is needed for these plans and incentivize them in general. So that's the origins of the idea. And I was very lucky that this happened to be an interest in economics at the same time when I came to Stanford.
Thank you. Are there more questions? Yes, please.
Gratulerar Bengt Holmström, Joakim Goxer från TT här, Nyhetsbyrån. Jag skulle vilja fråga, när man har studerat kontraktsteori så här i detalj, blir man bättre på att skriva kontrakt då? Hur är det med dina egna kontrakt?
Det är en bra fråga, för vi ekonomer överlag, och det här är någonting som folk förstår kanske inte. Vi tänker på ett annat sätt. Och många saker som verkar mycket motstridiga eller konstiga i vårt tänkande och i världen, så det bygger på en långsiktig logik som vi har funderat på. Så i den meningen är det väldigt vetenskapligt. Ibland jämför jag det med det Copernicus, som människorna ser att solen går runt jorden, men vi ekonomer vet att det är jorden som går runt solen.
Getting a bit worrying there. Last question, brief question from the lady over there.
Yes, hello, congratulations, Mr. Holmström. Louise Sandin-Mitton from Svenska Dagbladet, Stockholm. I have two questions. The first is, with your way of thinking about contracts, how could that be applied to political situations, as for the, say, for the upcoming US election now, between a politician and then a large number of people, all the citizens? And the second question is whether if you do have an idea, but coming up from your early experience with Nokia and now in Sweden with Ericsson having some troubles, do you see, has there been, can your research sort of explain what has happened in these companies in any way?
I wouldn't call that.
Yes, I mean, let me take the first question because it's more creative in some sense. You know, that relates to the political incentives. So they mentioned my work on career concerns. That is work that applies very much to a broad range of things. So, but it's not about money. It is about what people's ambitions are and the motivations for why they are doing things. And there, you know, such things as visibility, if you look at them now, they are all on TV and such. That's being on TV and having everybody look at them perform, say, these debates, those have both good incentives and bad incentives involved. So, you know, the what we call implicit incentives or these motivations, they are very complicated to deal with, and they drive bad behavior, they drive good behavior as well.
Thank you very much, Professor Holmström. I'm afraid we'll have to stop there. There will be more opportunities to interview Professor Holmström when he comes to Stockholm in December. So thank you very much and see you in December.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Any quick questions to the panel? If not, Yes, we have reached Oliver Hart, and he was also very happy and pleased, and both of them expressed that they are delighted to be sharing the prize with each other. They are appreciate each other as colleagues and friends. So, with that, we'll close this part of the press conference, and now it's time for individual interviews with experts and committee members for those of you who have requested interviews. And then you're all welcome back on, I think, December 7th. Thank you.